Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome you all to a very important meeting, a very exciting meeting, I think. I'd first like to thank Carl Benson and Jack Laird and Wes Jordan for helping me arrange and set up this meeting and getting out publicity and so forth. This is actually the third meeting we've held on healthy soil. And the first one was 3 years ago. Practically almost the same date in November that this one is. And that came about from a meeting that some of us went to in Pest. Can agricultural practice then can reverse global warming? And that was the key, reverse global warming, and that got us excited. So we went to that meeting that was attended by Will Candler and Phil Navarro and myself.
And me.
Oh, you were there too?
Yes,
Okay.
I was.
I'm sorry. And that was in Bethesda.
Right.
Yeah. So I wanted to get that group here, and we managed to get the group to speak. Actually, in November of 3 years ago. And lo and behold, Dana Stein came to our meeting. And Dana Stein is a delegate in the Maryland legislature. And he was very impressed. They gave a similar talk here about reversing global warming using soil sequestration. So he wanted to proceed with some legislation on it. And so a number of us helped them, including some people that are here, to develop the Healthy Soil Act. And the Healthy Soil Act became law early last year, and went into effect October of last year. And in the Healthy Soil Law, it's stated that conditions should be developed so that soil can sequester carbon. That's written into the law, in addition to, of course, producing healthy food. So there was a committee that got set up, led by the Maryland Agriculture Department, with Susan Payne was the chair, is the chair. And I'm on that committee. A number of us are, and so they're developing procedures that are good for healthy soil. But there's one omission, and that is what happens when you put Roundup on soil. And all the research, and Michael and I have talked about this a lot, indicates that you cannot have healthy soil with Roundup present. So, and I brought this up at our meetings, but nobody wanted to talk about it.
And we met with Dana Stein and told him as well.
Right. And the feeling is, or at least the rumors are, that there's a Farm Bureau that likes the use of Roundup and doesn't want to, it's convenient for the farmers because it's good for weed, good for weed control and so forth. And so politically, they don't want to get into it. All right. Howard, Michael and I talked about this and said, well, I think we're going to have to get into it whether they like it or not. So I happen to be a member of this group as well, which is the Climate Stewards of Annapolis. And so we decided to hold this meeting to discuss the problem and what to do about it. Now, and actually we had another meeting a year ago, practically on this date, with, that was after the Healthy Soil Bill was starting to be implemented. And Susan Payne was there, and
Lori Aguilar.
Lori Aguilar was there, and Michael, and made a presentation then. There was indications of some division of opinion here, but anyway, the purpose was to alert the community that the bill is on the table, it's being implemented, and we'd like your support. So anyway, I told you what happened after that. So anyway, this is the meeting that we want to deal with. Our first speaker is going to be Michael Locklear. And Michael has a very impressive background. I'll scan very quickly and then talk more about him. In his official biography here, independent researcher and consultant with 30 years of experience in soil and nutrition research in organic farming, environmentalist and peace and health activist. And peace and health, I want to emphasize because that is part of his life. Michael has published more than 200 articles on health, nutrition, alternative medicine, former member of the Organic Materials Review Institute, promotes adding minerals, not chemical fertilizers, to depleted soils to increase plant nutrients and grow quality food. And Michael has written an excellent white paper on nutrient density through soil health. And Michael has done a lot of literature research on nutrients in the soil and depletion and the importance of adding nutrients. And I want to say that Michael happens to be a Native American. He's done his own research. He's a very independent researcher. He has not had a college education, sort of by choice, I think. But I would say, knows a lot more than any professor I know in college in that field. So he's he does continually research, and I'm the benefactor of that because he emails me studies that he's just pulled out of the internet, and I send them off to you. So if you want to get his studies, you can get on my email list, and I'll give you my email address if you really want to. I'm serious. It's a simple one. It's Dick, my first name, 1, the number 1, VH at the Vanning Hubel at Comcast.net. I'll say that again. DICK 1 VH at Comcast.net. And I have an email list of about 300 people, and so I try to keep people informed. So some of you are on it, I'm sure. I guess I won't take any more of Michael's time here, and then we'll get started on. Oh,
You You want to read this?
Oh, yeah, I'm going to read this first.
Okay.
This is a piece of propaganda that Bayer has put out. Bayer has bought Monsanto, and you probably know that. So Monsanto exists no longer, it's been bought up by Bayer. However, the same propaganda is coming out from Bayer as came out from Monsanto. This ad was put in the Washington Post, a full-page ad on October 31st, page A5. I don't know if you can get it on the internet or not, but we want to read this, because this will set the background for Michael's talk. Michael's talk will respond to this ad. So I'm going to let this is Alan Cohen, who's going to speak later, and he's going to read the whole ad so everybody can hear it, right?
Yes, and I'm going to put my Bayer hat on that I brought with me today, because Wendell Berry talks about what hat is the farmer wearing, and you see these people wearing hats, and whose hat are they thinking with? Whose hat are they thinking with? So they give out little things like this. I don't usually wear this hat. Okay, so this is our vision for safe and sustainable agriculture, and it is signed at the bottom by Jesus Madrazo, Head of Agricultural Affairs and Sustainability, Bayer Crop Science Division. An open letter to our stakeholders. There has never been a more important time for innovation and in agriculture. Our world faces enormous challenges, from a changing climate to limited natural resources to a growing population. For more than 150 years, Bayer has been dedicated to creating products that help people in a changing world. I'm not going to put any editorial.
I will, when you're done.
That's the substance you talk.
Our focus has been on new treatments for diseases, helping people get well and stay well, and providing farmers with breakthrough innovations to help nourish our growing world and preserve natural resources. We call it Science for a Better Life. The passion is deeply personal to me. Visiting my grandfather's farm in Mexico at a young age, I learned the value farmers place on protecting their precious resources to continue the bountiful crops each year. These early lessons shaped how I view agriculture and are the same values that inform Bayer's commitment to delivering better solutions for farmers and more choice for consumers to help them and our planet thrive. As part of our portfolio, glyphosate-based herbicides will continue to play a key role in helping agriculture meet pressing environmental and food security challenges as the global population grows by 2 billion people through 2050. Take just one example. The combination of glyphosate with glyphosate-tolerant crops promotes environmentally friendly practices, such as the reduction of fuel use on sprayer paths over the field and the adoption of conservation tillage methods, which reduce the need for plowing soils. By adopting conservation tillage, farmers can leave their soil intact while the previous year's crop residues or organic matter acts like mulch on top of the soil, keeping healthy microbes intact and supporting soil health while preventing runoff into nearby rivers and streams. The combination of glyphosate-tolerant crops with glyphosate-based herbicides results in a substantial reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, a reduction equivalent of taking 11.8 million cars off the road in 2015 alone, or more than 5 times the number of cars registered in New York City. Recently, there has been increased media scrutiny, attention on the safety of glyphosate-based products. As a science and innovation company, we feel a deep responsibility to society and our planet, and want to reiterate our commitment to sound science and the safe use of our products. Sorry. Glyphosate-based herbicides are among the most rigorously studied products of their kind. Hundreds of government-required studies, peer-reviewed publications, and ongoing reviews by regulatory and scientific bodies for over 40 years confirm that glyphosate-based products are safe for use as labeled. The largest epidemiology study on real-world pesticide use, which was released in 2018 through the support of the Independent National Cancer Institute, followed more than 50,000 pesticide applicators for over 20 years and found no association between glyphosate-based herbicides and cancer. Of course, they don't talk about kidney disease.
Well, they don't talk about the World Health Organization's finding either, or the court. This was in response to the court's decision.
Exactly. Yeah. When it comes to the safety of herbicides, manufacturers like Bayer are subject to strict regulatory requirements and must submit their products for periodic review by oversight authorities around the world. These independent regulatory agencies continue to find that glyphosate-based products can be used safely and that glyphosate is not carcinogenic. Not only the US EPA, but also the European Food Safety Authorities, EFSA, the European Chemicals Agency, ECHA, the German BFR, and the Australian, Canadian, and Japanese regulatory authorities, as well as the joint FAO-WHO meeting on pesticide residues, JMPR. Indeed, glyphosate is currently approved for use in more than 160 countries. We regularly hear from farmers, consumers, environmental, and scientific experts that glyphosate-based herbicides are essential for sustainable agriculture and our planet. We certainly agree. We also understand that some people may have questions about glyphosate or other innovations farmers use in modern agriculture. As consumers, parents, and community members ourselves, we are eager to share our work and want consumers to have the information they need, except labeling, to feel confident about the food they put on their table. Just as my grandfather looked after his farm and its crops for future generations, when it comes to sustainability, we take a long-term view and prioritize meeting our commitments to sustainability as rigorously as we strive to meet our financial commitments to our shareholders. Dialogue with consumers is one of our key commitments. We invite you to visit Bayer.com to learn more, and we look forward to continuing to improve lives through excellence in research and innovation. Jesus Madrazo, Head of Agricultural Affairs and Sustainability, Bayer Crop Science Division, and in small letters at the bottom it says, as with any pesticide product, always read and follow label instructions.
Wonderful.
Like, it's yours. Okay.
It's all yours.
Well, first let me respond to this. And hi, hello, and thanks for coming out this afternoon. Just a little brief history on the 150 years of Bayer. Bayer was the company that first patented heroin as a medicine. We know how valuable that is. They were also the inventors of mustard gas, which was widely used in World War I to slaughter a tremendous number of people. They were also the manufacturers, under their previous identity, of the gas that was used to execute the Jews in World War II. Now that's just a small piece of what they are. But I assume that this man is a graduate of the Trump School of Ethics, because virtually everything he said with his name was a lie. This is proven by over 15,000 pages obtained from Monsanto itself, and from the more than 300 studies that have been done by independent researchers around the world, including the World Health Organization, the International Research Agency for Cancer, where 17 scientists reviewed all known scientific information on the subject of glyphosate and determined that it was a possible carcinogen in humans, which is basically the highest rank they give, and a definite carcinogen in animals. It kills your dog, it kills your cat, it kills everything else. So this is an example of what is known as the Merchants of Doubt. The Merchants of Doubt was a book written about 10 or 15 years ago. There's also a documentary by the same name. And what the Merchants of Doubt are, they're everywhere in on every subject matter. They are the people who appear to be professional, well-educated. They never call themselves scientists, but they act as if they are scientists. They are the propagandist expert. And their job is to make sure that you don't believe anyone like me. And you don't believe any environmentalist. We're all a bunch of liberal conspirators. We're the Democratic mob, et cetera, et cetera. So Bayer is maybe the most criminal organization on the face of the planet after glyphosate, the single most criminal organization in the history of mankind. We can start now if you like. First one.
Next one.
First one. Yes. Compromised health is the subject here. Corporations have hijacked our brains and our bodies. Next. So we're at a crossroads, and we're going to have to decide whether or not we're going to take control of our destiny, or we're going to go down the abyss that the corporations have set up for us in their version of reality, which you just heard part of. So the human body, did you know the human body is not a single organism? The human body is actually a community, a superorganism of between 37 and 100 trillion microorganisms. We are thousands of biologically diverse species. The community is self-organizing, self-regulating, and self-replicating. Each cell communicates with all other cells in the body. Each cell has a reproductive system, a respiratory system, a circulatory system, a digestive system, and an elimination system. This is what we are. We're bacteria, with a little bit of fungus, and a few viruses included. Not the bad viruses. There's some of them that are beneficial to us. This is a diagram of the cell. The main thing we'll be talking about today will be the mitochondria. Mitochondria is the most essential component. It's a bacteria. It's clusters of bacteria. It's the most essential component in life of all forms. It produces all the energy for all other cells, along with a host of other vital functions. When it goes into dysfunction, we get sick and we die. So cells perform 37,000 billion actions per second. That's 37 followed by 21 zeros. That's every second in your body. Busy. About 50 to 70 billion cells are replaced every day. 1% of our genes are human. Now, we're the only creature on the planet that's defined by 1% of its DNA. 99% of our genes are bacterial. So you might want to take a look at redefining what we call ourselves next. Mitochondria. Did you know that we eat to feed our mitochondria? Mitochondria produce all the cellular energy in our body. They're clusters of specialized bacteria. In the heart, for instance, in each heart cell within the heart, there are 17,000 mitochondrial bacteria. In the brain, there are 10,000 mitochondrial bacteria in every single brain cell. There is no mitochondria in blood cells. There are a quadrillion mitochondrial bacteria in the body. I'll let you read this for yourself. Okay.
What is the last?
This one is the percentage of individual humans that are different from one another in terms of mitochondria.
Microbiome.
The microbiome is the name for the system of these microorganisms in the body. Microbiome it's not a new word, but the science is new. Rob Knight, who's at UCLA, heads up the Human Microbiome Project. It was funded by the National Institutes of Health. It's a $3 billion study. That's how we came to understand what I've just told you about what the human body actually is. Now, they're not done. There's some lack of clarity about the numbers. That's why it says 10 to 100 trillion. The latest data is 37 to 100 trillion. And there's some other, but the numbers aren't going to matter that much in the long run. We're not humans.
Would you repeat the name of that individual that you said? You said someone in California is studying.
Oh, Rob Knight, and he's at UCLA,
Okay.
and he is the director of the human microbiome study with the National Institutes of Health. Okay. So we are minerals and water. Over 100 minerals are found on the Earth. Some of them are very rare. Oxygen, hydrogen, carbon, and nitrogen make up 96% of our body, and the other 70 minerals make up the remaining 4%. So minerals run everything. They balance the pH. They allow cells to communicate with each other. They make your muscles work properly. They regulate tissue growth, and they provide structural support for your bones and your teeth. Calcium is your bones and your teeth. It's the number one mineral in your body, followed by magnesium, which is number 2. So manganese, I'm sorry. Manganese is what's being called by Rob Knight and his folks the life switch. So it's found in all organisms. It's an essential nutrient required for the operation of enzymes. By the way, enzymes are a co-function of minerals, as are amino acids and vitamins. So when you hear the word nutrients, that word has been bastardized. Nutrient means minerals. So vitamins and minerals, nutrients are minerals. Minerals generate vitamins, they generate amino acids, and they generate enzyme and enzyme action. So mitochondria, which is the death switch in the body, has a crucial role in cell survival and death mechanisms. It's especially important to protect the mitochondria from oxidative stress, which you've heard about antioxidants. That's what it's trying to do, is prevent the oxidative stress in mitochondria. So manganese superoxide dipentase is the principal antioxidant enzyme in mitochondria. And it consumes 90% of the oxygen used by the cells and are especially vulnerable to oxidative stress. This radical is one of the reactive oxygen species produced in mitochondria during the ATP, which is andosine, I think it's triphosphate. It also catalyzes the conversion of the superoxides into hydrogen peroxide. So the waste function of mitochondrial DNA, the waste is hydrogen peroxide, which the body then converts into water, and we sweat out toxins. So ATP is the currency of life. It's the high energy molecule. Mitochondria antioxidant manganese superoxide is encoded by the genomic DNA, and its function is fully activated in mitochondria to detoxify free radicals generated by mitochondrial respiration. It also catalyzes this into the ordinary molecular oxygen or hydrogen peroxide. I don't know if you know, but hydrogen peroxide turns to oxygen. So manganese deficiency, can you see? Manganese deficiency. It impairs growth and causes skeletal abnormalities, shortens and thickens limbs. It causes curvature of the spine. It impairs reproductive function, glucose tolerance. It alters carbohydrate metabolism. It causes gut dysbiosis, and it is directly related to the causes of Alzheimer's, autism, depression, anxiety syndrome, and Parkinson's disease. Alzheimer's and autism are not brain disorders. They are systemic body disorders. It is not genetic, and the problem is not caused by the brain. It's actually caused by fecal matter leaking out of the gut and going through the blood-brain barrier into the brain. So soil is the root of all global health, and it's also a health crisis, and it's also the root of the climate crisis that we're in. Restoring the microbes and the fungi and the minerals to the soil will improve human health, increase food security. It allows us to sequester carbon. You can't sequester carbon in the soil without mycorrhizal fungi. And it will establish environmental sustainability, which no chemical product can be called sustainable. The word sustainable means that it has to be a naturally occurring process in nature. It is not sustainable, does not mean it keeps you on the farm, pays your bills, and keeps Bayer and Monsanto in business. That's not the definition of sustainability. However, the Republicans did hijack the word from the UN. It first occurs in 1989 in the Rio Agreement, where we define what environmental sustainability is. So diesel fuel in tractors, not sustainable. Tractors are not sustainable. Any form of chemical input is not sustainable. Loss of topsoil is not sustainable. According to the USDA, this shows how that they've known for quite some time that soil is being depleted of minerals beginning in 1910 at 500 parts per million, down to below 50 parts per million in 2006. Dr. August Dunning, I think from UCLA at one point, examined the relationship between these mineral deficiencies and human disease and used data from all these different agencies.
Mike, are you going to talk to the mechanisms that cause that depletion of minerals?
Yep, we're getting there.
Okay.
I'm setting you up. This is Dr. Dunning's chart. So as you can see, as minerals began to decrease from 1900 down to this point in 1950, the disease begins to take off. And this is based on the government's own findings, the broadest medical data in the world from all those different agencies. So, Linus Pauling said that you can trace every sickness, every disease, and every ailment to a mineral deficiency. And he's absolutely accurate, or he was, he's deceased now. This is the USDA's chart that shows how many people are deficient in the RDA level. Now, RDA was established to introduce trace amounts of vitamins and minerals in order to prevent things like scurvy and rickets. It is by no means meant to sustain human health. It's meant to prevent these things that were annoying people, so they put vitamin D in milk and so on and so forth. And you look on the label of processed foods, you'll see they've added niacin and iron and all these other things. And the reason is because if they didn't add those things, they couldn't call it food. By the time they're done processing, it has no food value whatsoever. So the government requires fortification or enrichment, which then allows it to be called food. It's not food, but they can call it that. Next. So the soil can save us. The farmers are the fathers of civilization. You look around and all these magnificent things we see on this planet are sitting on a farmer's back. Every single person alive requires this farmer. Everything we do requires the farmer. We could eliminate everything in civilization but the farmer and we'd be fine. Nutrient-rich soil is the nation's greatest asset. Over the history of mankind, the largest cause of civilization collapse has been soil depletion. But more than 20 major civilizations collapsed because they destroyed their soil. The Sumerians, the Babylonians, there was even the interruption in the history of the Egyptians was over drought and soil depletion. The modern world is on the brink of an environmental disaster. Correction, we're not on the brink, we're in it. We're inside of a massive environmental disaster. And we may suffer the same fate as the other societies that destroyed their soil. Glyphosate and GMOs. This is a broad spectrum herbicide that was introduced in 1974. It works along with plants that have been genetically modified. The reason they were genetically modified is when glyphosate was introduced in 1974, it killed everything, so farmers couldn't use it. So up around the early 90s, they managed to inject fish genes and insect genes and other things into agricultural crops and animals. But the gene they put into the soybean and the corn the farmer grows today is resistant to Roundup. But we're not. Did you know that glyphosate is the most widely used agricultural chemical in history? It was patented as a chelator in 1964, which it binds minerals. Now, it means that wherever glyphosate is present, whatever minerals are there, it will lock onto those minerals. It will lock them up. So those minerals are not available in the soil, they're not available in the plant, they're not available in the animal that eats the plant, they're not available in you. And when you eat glyphosate, which you'll see that you do, it's locked all your minerals up. And that is the root cause of all of the current disease waves that we have. And they're astronomical numbers compared to when I was born 60 years ago. So it prevents the absorption of minerals, and I covered all that, couldn't I? So Stauffer invented this, or came up with this compound to clean industrial boiler pipes. Because anyone knows anything about industrial boilers, inside the pipe you get
Mineral crud.
scale, but it's more like hardening of the arteries. And so this stuff would go in there, and it would bind to all those minerals and clean out the pipes. And then they did something else with it, and we don't know what it was. But in those days, we didn't have an EPA, so they probably just dumped it in the backyard. So they're removing the minerals from you. Also, in 2010, it was patented as an antibiotic. Now, antibiotics mean it kills living organisms, particularly microorganisms and fungi. So when you apply it to the soil, it locks up all the minerals, and it kills the beneficial microorganisms that fight pathogens and keep the soil healthy, and it also kills the mycorrhizal fungi, which is the only way plants access food is through these organisms. Plants do not eat dirt, and they do not dissolve minerals in the soil themselves. The plant's roots are covered in a fungus, mycorrhizal fungus, and for 450 million years, they've been getting along just fine in a symbiotic relationship. Well, this stuff kills them. And so the plant, not only does it have no access to minerals, it is in an environment where glyphosate is breeding pathogens because some are resistant, and there are super pathogens now that did not exist before. These have been found by Don Huber, Professor Emeritus formerly of Purdue University, one of the foremost leading experts on plant physiology in the world, and perhaps the world's leading expert on glyphosate and GMOs.
What's his name again?
Don Huber, H-U-M-E-R, B-E-R. You'll be no problem finding him on the internet. One of the most distinguished scientists on the planet. So, glyphosate disrupts hormones, it causes birth defects, it binds metals in the body and removes them, the ones you need, like calcium, magnesium, manganese, boron, zinc, copper, selenium, all the things they know we're deficient in. Well, it's like the cancer and other diseases, and it damages cellular DNA. Yes, ma'am?
Could you tell us what disease it was used to treat when it was antibiotic?
It was never used, but it was patented. The intention was to use it to cure malaria, but it was found to be so toxic that they couldn't get approval.
So have they used it at all?
No, only on us. See, in the United States, you require a medical license to administer antibiotics, unless you're Monsanto. If you're Monsanto, everybody gets antibiotics. The plants get them, the animals get them, and you get them. The other thing about glyphosate is it's bioaccumulative, which means it does not leave your body, and it is also systemic. It literally is in every single cell of your body. It's in the air, it's in the water, it's in all the food you're eating, even if it's organic.
I wonder if you could address, Michael, when they introduced glyphosate, they said, oh, it's safe, it's going to bind to the clay particles.
Oh, it's safe as salt.
In the soil, and it's not going to move. This whole binding to the clay particles is bogus.
Well, clay is all minerals.
Yeah.
So yeah, of course it binds to it.
But it said it doesn't move and doesn't. And the other thing
Yeah.
that they said, the other thing that's happened is that the tolerances that the USDA and FDA have been raised.
Of course.
Because
If you go back to agricultural literature 100 years ago, they'll tell you need these huge number of minerals. Today, I think it's 3 or 6. So as minerals deplete from the soil, the USDA says, oh, we're going to lower this number of essential minerals. Well, that's what they do with everything. You may remember the acceptable levels of lead until George H.W. Bush's dog ate paint, flaking off the White House and got lead poisoning. And he decided to have the White House stripped down, and they raised the acceptable limits of lead. There are acceptable limits of mercury. No, there's not. Okay? So the government has acceptable limits of everything that's deadly and toxic. The government works for you, and it should be watched like a thief in the bank. And what we do is we're absent. So it would take me 5 weeks to stand here and tell you every lie that government and corporations have told us. I'm sorry, go back to that. So the World Health Organization, which is generally considered to be the world's leading medical experts on the planet, okay? The International Research Agency for Cancer finds that glyphosate to be a possible carcinogen in 2015. 17 scientists reviewed all the world's data. They immediately, Monsanto attacked them, along with their watchdogs at USDA. Stephen O'Duke is one of them. They're scientists in universities. They all went after this group. Well, another 100 scientists joined in to co-sign their findings. Swedish scientists find an increase in cancer lists. The EPA declared glyphosate a possible carcinogen in 1985, but contrary to this article, EPA has not reviewed glyphosate since 1993. This claim that there is this ongoing review of scientific data is an absolute lie. What they're doing is they're reviewing what we're finding and calling us kooks. That's the review they're doing. California has moved to label glyphosate as a carcinogen. It was kicked back by the court, but 6 weeks ago, the Circuit Court of San Francisco ruled in the Dwayne Johnson case that glyphosate does cause cancer, that Monsanto knew it, and they awarded a $289 million settlement. That's since been cut. Bayer tried to get a retrial. The judge denied it, but they did lower the award. So studies from Argentina. Argentina, by the way, is one of the large, they produce more soybeans than we do, so they use a lot more glyphosate. Irreversible damage to DNA found in their study. The Sri Lanka studies found that it increases the incidence of kidney disease. So the Environmental Working Group put a list together of all the science-based links to glyphosate and disorders or disease. ADHD, thyroid hormone disruption. Birth defects, mainly linked to the birth defect where portions of the brain, the skull, and the scalp fail to form in development.
Where's that study from?
Which study?
Right now, it says new study.
Oh, I don't know. Free GMO USA is the source. There's plenty of studies that support this graft. So the baby's not Roundup ready. Autism. So what glyphosate does is because it kills gut bacteria, it breaks down the permeability of the gut, allows leaky gut. So then fecal matter leaks out of your gut, travels up through your bloodstream, goes into your brain, and if you're elderly, you get Alzheimer's, and if you're small, you could be in the womb and come out with autism. Pathogenic bacteria is highly resistant to glyphosate, and one of the things that Don Huber has found is that out in the Midwest, they have a phenomenon going on called sudden death in soybeans, where you look at your field, it's perfectly green and wonderful. A week later, it'll start turning brown, and then a few days after that, it's completely dead. What he found was there was a mutated pathogenic fungus in the ground related to the fusarium. So it kills these plants, and nothing can kill it. Well, nothing chemical. So this got him forced out of Purdue after, I don't know, 40 years. So it promotes aluminum accumulation in the brain, and it's the leading cause of autism and Alzheimer's in the United States. And there are more than 100 studies. So as you can see, from 1990 to 2010, there was a substantial increase in the incidence of autism in the population in the United States.
But this is just correlation, not causation.
Well,
You're correlating two
it's
events.
like, okay, in science, there's no absolute truth. The closest thing we have is the theory. So, yeah, it's a correlation.
I'm just saying what this guy would say if we wrote this editorial.
Oh yeah, well he would say this is just made up. It's junk science.
The correlation.
Well, these correlations are found. I personally looked at 400 studies involving more than 3,000 scientists. And as you will see later, including the Monsanto documents, including the documents that Monsanto was required to provide to the court in San Francisco in discovery. Yes, ma'am.
The other thing that I found, actually with my doctor I was going to found that correlates with autism is the amount of black mold toxins.
That's
So I think
probably,
the
that may be
two-
true too.
I think the glyphosate and the black mold toxins are working together to
Could be.
increase the autism and Alzheimer's and all these other problems.
There is an increase of pathogenic bacteria and fungi in the environment, which is new. So I can't say that that is accurate, but I can say it's likely, it's probable.
Is there any difference between Roundup and Rodeo or glyphosate alone and glyphosate as a
Yes.
formulation like Roundup
Yes, there are many products out on the market that are a herbicide that have the primary ingredient is glyphosate. Bayer has one, Dow has one, Syngenta has one. So there's lots of products out there where the active ingredient is glyphosate.
Their patent is gone, so.
Well, they let the patent go, and the reason was because they already control you, so they don't need to protect their market. They already have complete domination of the world food supply, and you can't use their seed without it. And they're the world's largest seed provider, and they control the world's seed supply, so they let it go. What scientists are finding now is, and there's new studies will be coming out, is that the inactive ingredients in the Roundup formulation and the others is actually far more dangerous than glyphosate, which is hard for me to imagine.
Well, I worked at the EPA in the Farm Workers Safety Office, and we had statistics from California because Reagan had stopped collecting them nationally that showed that Roundup was responsible for it was the #1 eye and skin irritant, and it was most likely from POEA, the tallowate. It was in a sticker that made it stick to the plant.
Yeah, the surfactant.
But that's never studied. It's the
Well, they're studying now. They're studying
But I mean, EPA just studies active ingredients.
Oh,
They
yeah.
don't study the formulation, but it was the formulation that was causing eye and skin irritation.
That's right. And the EPA isn't studying glyphosate at all. I mean, President Obama put the vice president of Monsanto in charge of the food division of the FDA. Clarence Long, the Supreme Court justice, is a former Monsanto lawyer. Donald Rumsfeld you can thank him for saccharin.
Aspartame.
Aspartame, I'm sorry, and he came from Monsanto too. Monsanto runs the government, and it runs the agricultural divisions of the government.
Obama put in Rajiv Shah into the USAID as well, who was formerly working.
Right. Well, because people like Bill Gates and other eugenics people, they own huge amounts of Monsanto. So naturally, they're spreading it all over the world. Now, what he doesn't tell you in there is 30 countries have banned this product, including Russia. Most of Africa's gotten rid of it. China's getting rid of it. France is about to ban it. The European Parliament will, I'm pretty sure once this wind dies down, they'll ban it too. So it's dangerous, and people know this all over the world. But getting past the merchants of doubt, people like me don't go on television. Every night it's the merchants of doubt. They can afford to, environmentalists can't afford full-page ads in the Washington Post, but they can. So, their voice is louder and there's more of them. So glyphosate, okay, good. This is a chart created by Stephanie Seneff at MIT. Again, one of the world's most renowned scientists. People also tell you what I'm telling you. The glyphosate is unimaginably dangerous, and it should never be allowed anywhere on this planet, much less in your bloodstream. So she's predicting that by 2025, half of all children will be autistic. Okay. So, in the studies done by, I believe it was, U.S. Geological Study, they found glyphosate in 75% of the rain and the air samples. So we're breathing it. It's ubiquitous in the environment. You cannot. There's no way to escape it. Sterilizes men, gives you cancer. It's a neurotoxin. Destroys your DNA. Robs your baby of its mind. Okay. Birth defects. That disrupts vitamin A. And people who live within a mile of these applications are twice as likely to have birth defects in their children. This study comes from regions all around the world, including Indiana. Congenital defects, 400% increase in the decade after Roundup was introduced in Chaco, Argentina. And children born with birth defects have very high levels of glyphosate in their system. Moms across America did their own research. I think it was 12 women, and they found glyphosate in mother's milk. Well, you may recall that that's why we banned PET. It was found in mother's milk, 90% of the women around the world. Monsanto, by the way, has given us a lot of wonderful gifts. DDT, dioxin, known as Agent Orange, and PCBs. The UN lists these as the top 4 most deadly compounds ever introduced into the environment. It took enormous effort to get those things banned worldwide. So we're going to ban glyphosate too. So chronically ill humans have higher levels of glyphosate in their urine. There are now people selling urine tests for glyphosate. You can buy one or take my word for it. It's linked to chronic kidney disease in Sri Lanka. It accumulates not only in soybeans, but it bioaccumulates in you or in us. Glyphosate's linked to non-Hodgkin's. The court just said so. Causes toxic damage to rat brains. Rat studies and monkey studies are easy correlation to human behavior or human conditions. Increases birth defects in pigs. In Germany, there were 2 studies done. One in Germany with a pig farmer and one in Denmark with a cattle farmer. And their pigs were being born with birth defects. Their litters were low. They had to constantly, the vet was there every week. So this farmer took his animals off of GMO foods, and the whole thing disappeared in, I think it was 6 months. The cattle farmer did the same thing. Get rid of the GMOs, get rid of any presence of glyphosate in the food, the animal system recovers. Leads to honeybee starvation as well, and it's toxic to earthworms.
What is a study about the honeybee starvation? Where was that done?
I don't know offhand, but well, I was going to say the Maryland Pesticide Network, but they're actually going after neonicotinoids, which is a Bayer product. I don't know. You know, there's literally hundreds and hundreds of these studies. And there are many things that affect honeybees. One is neonicotinoid, the other one is Wi-Fi.
I think in this instance, it was because the glyphosate kills the weeds, but the weeds are the food source for the bees.
The flowers, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, so things like goldenrod, and so
Yeah,
it's usually like,
so it's indirect. It's an indirect effect.
Well, it's ingested.
Well,
no, it's killing the bee's food source.
Yeah, well, killing the source, not the pollen, not
Glyphosate is
robbing
so
them of pollen.
widely used, it's used by the management of roadsides, and so and obviously
Parks,
farmland.
schoolyards.
So because it's ubiquitous and it's turning up in our air and our water, it's so ubiquitous.
Yeah.
And so it's basically the same reason that the monarch butterflies are dying, because their food source and they can only use the milkweed to raise their young. That is disappearing as well, also because of the increase in these herbicides. So when the herbicides get to the level where they're everywhere, then we lose this biodiversity that keeps these species alive.
In fact, since 1970, 70% of all the species on the planet have gone extinct.
Well, there is one place where they probably don't use glyphosate, that's Cuba. And they have honey that is not contaminated with
Right.
pesticides.
Well, Russia would have the same thing because they don't use it either.
Russia doesn't use it.
No, they hate Monsanto. Sometimes dictators are good guys. To some people, if you're not a reporter.
Just got that.
So brain cancer. High levels of glyphosate, people exposed in close proximity to Roundup, children, get brain cancer. Breast cancer. I'm 64. I don't remember a lot of conversation about breast cancer prior to 1990, somewhere in there. Originally, they said it was a direct DNA relationship to people of German derivation. Well, DNA doesn't cause disease. It doesn't cause cancer either. Glyphosate does.
Well, there's many other things that also are affecting that. There's other causes of the breast cancer that people have documented, researchers have with the epigenetic effects, so that the women who are were exposed in the 50s, who were children running through that fogging of the DNA, of the DDT. It wasn't them, it wasn't their children, but it's their grandchildren
Sure.
that are having the breast cancer spike.
Well, as you know, I'm sure, chemicals tend to act together.
Yeah.
There are about 200,000 chemical compounds in the ambient atmosphere, in the environment. We know about 10,000 of them are carcinogenic. The reason we don't know that the rest of them are is because the government doesn't study these things. The Congress decided you had no right to a GMO label in food. Republican Congress. The government's not in the business any more than a corporation is in the business of acting in your best interest. The government isn't either. So you're going to have to do your own research. So in a survey of 65,000 people farming in Argentina, they found cancer rates 2 to 4 times above the national average. Where Roundup was sprayed, 31% of the residents of a family member had cancer. This is also true in the Indiana study. This is the incidence of thyroid cancer increase since 1975. Right around here, we got glyphosate. Now, we were already pretty polluted by the time we forced Richard Nixon to create the EPA. And Earth Day was created and all of that. I was the first Earth Day in 1970. And I marched in favor of the EPA creation, along with my anti-war marches. So, glyphosate Roundup shows up. There you go. Celiac disease, gluten intolerance. There's no such thing as gluten intolerance. You're intolerant to glyphosate. It kills your gut bacteria. It prevents enzymes from working. Enzymes is what does all the digestion of everything you eat. It causes mineral deficiencies and amino acid depletion, so proteins. It depletes your proteins. So the real reason is glyphosate. See, depression is not an SSRI deficiency. It's not an antipsychotic deficiency. It's something else. So, food allergies again. You don't really hear a lot about food allergies, kids with peanuts and all that kind of stuff, till 93, 94, somewhere in there. All of a sudden everybody's got this allergy and that allergy and this sensitivity and that sensitivity, and kids can eat anything. Kids are allergic to air. This is the celiac incidence. Once again, glyphosate shows up. Peaks, peaks, peaks. Wow, out of control, 2009.
And even though glyphosate is not, wheat is not Roundup ready, wheat and oats are not Roundup ready. Glyphosate
Right.
is
It's
used
a desiccant.
to dry down the crop before harvest, so it's.
Right, there are no GMO wheat, barley, oats, okay? But Monsanto came along and said, hey, Mr. Farmer, do you know that we can speed up your harvest time and get you to market faster so you don't have any weather events blocking harvest? Just spray this glyphosate on the ground before you plant it, and then spray it again. When it's green, it'll desiccate it for you. You can go in there and harvest all of it. And I'll be covering that more in a moment. Oh, I'm sorry, wait for this. So chronic kidney disease, okay? And all of these farmers where there's large concentrations of glyphosate being used, they're showing up with liver disease and renal failure. And the reason may be because of the minerals in the hard water actually enhances to some degree the way the glyphosate acts. Now, one of the leading cause, as far as I understand, of stage 4 kidney disease is nitrogen sludge. Now, the air we breathe is 79% nitrogen. So without the proper minerals to detox the body, that nitrogen builds up in the kidneys, and it kills you. This is the age-adjusted chart for renal failure deaths. And here we are again. Glyphosate shows up. I mean, I don't believe in coincidence.
What happened, how would you account for that diminishing?
Well, I don't. And I don't know that there's any science that would explain that. mean, if Don Hoover was here, he could probably tell you all this stuff. I only spent 6 months. I only read a couple hundred studies, so I don't know all of it. So the kidney and renal pelvis cancer incidence, same thing. Now this is more of a steady increase. And what he mentioned about the residual effects of DET, well, you got malathion and you've got a lot of other compounds that we're not talking about that are deadly and are introduced. So, and then they interact, and we don't know how that actually works. We know it happens, but we don't know how it happens. So some of these could, since these are the filters of your blood, some of these could be related to those other chemical interactions. It could be mineral deficiency from dead food. I mean, we've been eating dead food, well, as I showed you in the previous chart, since 1900. So, this requires a lot of study, and these companies are not interested in that. They're not going to fund it, and the government isn't going to fund it, and the government scientists agree with them. We have a saying in my business is, don't trust scientists with mortgages. Independent researchers have always been more reliable in their science than people who work in universities and research groups. About 85% of the money comes from corporate interests that do research in these fields. So they really can't be trusted. So colitis, depression. Now we've heard a lot about C. diff. C. diff is one of those things you get when you check in the hospital. I think the last time I looked, about 50% of the people who die in hospitals die as a result of infections they acquired after being admitted. C. diff is one of them. Another gift of glyphosate. And of course, depression. Depression, the chelation of manganese, magnesium, which is magnesium supplement, is a natural solution to depression. And also, serotonin is produced in the gut, not in the brain. It's done by the bacteria in the gut. So killing off the gut bacteria destroys your serotonin. The difference between serotonin is is the happy molecule. Dopamine is the pleasure molecule. That's largely in the brain. So we have a lot of unhappy people. In fact, we have an epidemic of despair worldwide. The largest number of people to die from other than disease in the world last year was suicide. That's more than there's about 50 or some odd wars going on the planet. Well, more people killed themselves and were killed in those wars last year. In the United States, it skewed the life expectancy. Men between age 35 and 55 are killing themselves at a rate so high that it's lowering the life expectancy for everyone in the United States. Type 2 diabetes. Low testosterone is a contributor to the rise of diabetes. And enzyme disruption, along with calcium chelation and magnesium chelation, are linked to heart disease. It's not fat, by the way. Go ahead. So this is the annual incidence of diabetes, age adjusted. Again, glyphosate. Go ahead. Hyperthyroidism. Again, that same group, the study they did in Argentina, very high level. Inflammatory bowel disorder, leaky gut syndrome. You can't absorb nutrients if your gut's weak, and the bacteria in your gut is dead. Thyroid cancer incidence rate, age adjusted, 1996. GMO meets glyphosate. And that's another thing. Part of this has to do with the introduction of GMOs. Because what Huber found was that when you have glyphosate and GMOs together, that's how you get these deadly pathogenic organisms in the soil. And we don't know what they're doing to your body, and nobody will tell us. And the government decided we didn't have a right to know whether we were eating it or not. Liver disease, Lou Gehrig's. See, these liver cells die within 24 hours of treatment. Now, these people aren't being dosed with this stuff. In fact, these scientists deliberately use the smallest dosage possible, far below what's allowed in the water system in the United States. Still got the same results. And the sulfate deficiency with ALS. Oh,